breaking news in your neighborhood. Watch Live on 5.
Today on Katie, it's one of the biggest and most important conversations we've had on the show. Race in America.
Race is tearing this country apart.
A candid, honest, and revealing conversation about how race has divided our country.
We have to talk about compassion, acceptance, respect.
From the stop and frisk debate to the heartbreak of Trayvon Martin's parents.
Trayvon was a child. He was a 17-year-old child. And we have to make sure that we're fighting for our kids.
Racism is our big conversation. From Studio One in New York, it's Katie.
You know, one of the reasons I wanted to do a talk show in the first place was to be able to explore some of the big issues we face, really as a country, in a much more meaningful, in-depth way. And I don't know about you, but everywhere I turned this past summer, I felt that the topic of race was front and center, whether it was in movies like The Butler or in the news like the George Zimmerman trial. Are we at one of those crucial moments in America when we can actually have an honest conversation? Or will the moment come and go as it has so often in the past? Well, to get us started, I asked talk show host and author Tavis Smiley to set the stage for us and help us begin this important show.
There are some four-letter words that are forbidden on network television. While this word is not on that list, it might as well be, since we studiously avoid ever really coming to terms with how to deal with it in America. R-A-C-E, race. Recently, Americans of all colors gathered on the National Mall to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington and the iconic I Have a Dream speech delivered by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And yet, 5 decades later, racism is still the most intractable issue in America. Just because we have a handful of movie stars of color who can open #1 movies like The Butler, just because you see interracial couples everywhere you look, and just because we live in the era of our nation's first black president, all is not well in America. Exhibit A, Trayvon Martin. Many fellow citizens are still trying to come to terms with the senseless death of this black male teenager. Exhibit B, Paula Deen. I'm convinced that the furor that erupted over her use of the so-called N-word,
I beg for your forgiveness,
speaks to the enduring belief that whether black folk are in the room or not, they are viewed disparagingly and often denigrated with ugly epithets. Exhibit C, stop and frisk. The data in New York City make it clear that we waste a lot of time harassing and haranguing people of color for no good reason. Why does crime fighting have to be color-coded? In the most multicultural, multiracial, and multi-ethnic America ever, what do we do about our race problem? For starters, racial reconciliation is only truly realized when all groups enjoy equal status. Are we ready and willing to treat each other as equals? If we are, then it's time for more action and less words. Real love and not forced tolerance. It's time to create that beloved community that Dr. King dreamed of. Change is inevitable, but growth is optional. We have to choose to love our neighbors as ourselves.
Please welcome Tavis Smiley. So appreciative, so grateful to Tavis for taking part in what we hope will really be a valuable and important conversation. So Tavis, thank you. Why is it still, here we are in 2013, so hard to talk about race in this country?
First of all, I'm glad you're covering this, because I think part of what's wrong with our nation when it comes to race, Katie, is that there's too much monologue and not enough dialogue. We want to hear ourselves speak, but we're not open to hearing the voices and perspectives and prisms of others. Number two, as I said in the piece, I think racism is still the most intractable issue in this country. We don't, for a lot of reasons, don't want to go there to have the kind of difficult, unsettling conversation that causes us to face these inconvenient and hard truths about the fact that in the most multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic America ever, we still don't see each other as equals.
Was a Broadway show called Avenue Q, and one of the songs was everybody's a little bit racist. And I think sometimes it's hard to confront in ourselves the less attractive qualities of that.
We all have biases, and that's human. And I think we all have prejudices about certain things, and even to a certain extent, I think that's human. Dr. King, though, in the movement defined racism as prejudice plus power. So it raises a real question as to who has the power to be racist. That is to say, how do you take those prejudices, how do you take those biases
and oppress?
There you go, and oppress and inflict other people. And in our country, still, there's a power divide. There's an inextricable link between race and poverty. Put another way, poverty is the new slavery in this country. And so when you talk about race, you can't disconnect it from a conversation about poverty, which includes a whole bunch of other folk in America who don't look like I look. But the bottom line is that race is an issue that we have to come to terms with. And as long as we think it isn't a problem, which so many people do believe, it's just not a problem anymore, or we close our ears because we're tired of hearing the conversation, then nothing gets done.
I know it's been 50 years since Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. And according to a recent Pew poll, basically, a lot of people, 50%, think a lot more needs to be done to achieve Martin Luther King's dream. So I know this is such a huge question, but what does need to be done?
I think, first of all, we have to understand that race is tearing this country apart at its very fiber. This is the new America, and it is, quite frankly, Katie, the only America we have. This is what we have to deal with, a multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic America, and we can't make America the great nation that she needs to be if we're going to deny the very people who are going to help bring America back.
That's true. You know, I know that you became really a champion for civil rights in college when you witnessed a tragedy happen to one of your friends. What happened?
A friend of mine named Denver Smith. I'll remember him for as long as I live. Denver Smith was a football player at Indiana University, African-American from the Chicago area, and long story short, was shot in the back 21 times by white cops in Bloomington, Indiana. And interestingly and ironically, and it's hard to even say this, the cops said they shot him in self-defense. 21 times in your back, but they shot you in self-defense. And so that was the thing that really, as a sophomore in college, awakened me to the fact that this is the country that I live in. Advocacy is not a spectator sport. You got to get off the sideline and get involved in the process. And that is true for all of us. All of us have to engage in this conversation. And that means moving beyond our comfort zones. It means getting out of our safe spaces, our secure spaces, and trying to put ourselves in the position, the shoes of the others. That's what we're lacking here. If we're going to tackle this race problem, Katie, more than anything else, we need empathy. We can't tolerate many more Paula Deans and many more Trayvon Martins, and we can't tolerate much more of this stop and frisk. If we don't start to address this problem, we are going to lose our democracy. It's that serious.
Well, I'm so happy that we're talking about it today, and perhaps something will come of this conversation. And Tavis is going to stick around as we continue to talk about this. Coming up, John Quinones from the hit TV show, What Would You Do? We'll show you how hidden cameras uncovered some not-so-hidden racial bias. That's right after this.
Coming up, some terrible truths about race.
It is easier for a white male with a criminal record to get a call back for a job than a black or Latino male whose record is clean.
That's next.
Talking about race in America, Tavis Smiley has been so nice and agreed to join us for this hour. On the ABC show, What Would You Do? John Quinones conducts undercover social experiments to find out how people react when they see, for example, a pregnant woman drinking or a couple fighting in the street, or frequently a racially charged incident going on in a public place. It's amazing what they capture when no one knows the cameras are rolling.
Hidden camera.
Excuse me, sir. Hi, I'm John Quinones.
Man, I can't talk right now. Don't bother. Don't bother. ¿Qué necesita? ¿Les puede decir que un café nada más? Nada más un café. Listen, you guys gotta learn the language before you come to this country, okay?
People like you come in and they just slip things in your bag, big jacket and everything. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I have not done anything wrong. Put in a complaint for one thing.
Hello, sir. My name is John Quinones. I'm a reporter with ABC News. We staged a little experiment in there to see how people would react to that kind of attitude. I'm American. I am an American.
When you think no one is watching, we are.
So please welcome John Quinones. Hi, John. So good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
Wow, you got a lot of fans out here.
Thank you.
So I think this show is so fascinating because it really does capture people oftentimes at their worst. And I'm curious, John, why have you all on the show tackled the topic of race?
You know, we tackle all issues, gay bashing, child bullying, spousal abuse, and of course race, the hottest hot button issue in this country, certainly since the election of President Obama. It's become even more so, and there's no shortage of news stories. What would you do is not a scientific study. You know, we don't carefully, perfectly do the show in scientific terms, but we do get a slice of America. We get a slice, a look at the greater American pie, and the fact is, we're all biased, and we see that in the show time and again. Whether we admit it or not, we are biased against people who are different skin color and a different dress, social status.
We have a clip, John, of a scenario that you and your team conducted earlier this summer. Can you set it up for us?
We've all heard of dine and dash. You know, you go to a restaurant, kids order a big meal, and then they run out on the tab.
Yes, as a former waitress, I have heard of that.
We were doing the show on Route 66 this past season, and in Oklahoma, in Weatherford, Oklahoma, this little town, we did our scenario with white teenagers running out on their tab, and then a group of African-American teenagers running out of the tab. Take a look at what happens.
Dude, she's so nice. And then we're gonna steal from her?
Listen, here's a plan. You're gonna go first. I'm gonna videotape it because this is like YouTube-worthy kind of stuff.
Is it recording?
Yes. Okay, cool.
What they record, let's go, is another clean getaway.
They're leaving. What? See that? Oh my God. I'm gonna be in so much trouble.
We'll pay for it. Don't worry about it. We got it.
Are you serious?
Yes.
But what if we change our actors' race? Now we bring Odysseus, Jasper, and Michael along for the ride.
We eat and we run out of here. That's it. It's easy, man. Eat and run.
Now this man wastes no time alerting the manager.
Them three colored kids talking about dining and dashing. Hey, don't forget where you're at. This ain't New York. Yo, this ain't New York. Let's get out of here. Hey, dining and dashing.
It's unbelievable. What did you tell them?
I think they figured out maybe they shouldn't be messing with a white redneck in a restaurant full of white people.
Yeah.
Weatherford, Oklahoma. Just call the cops. They'll catch up to them. I mean, you can't miss three colored kids. One of them got a big old afro.
And now he can't miss our cameras either.
I'm John Quinones.
You're a newsman.
Yeah.
Why are you all sitting with me?
Because we're doing a show about kids who dine and dash.
Oh, dude. Come on, man.
You didn't like what they were doing?
No. We don't like that kind of stuff out here. We're simple.
But you kind of put them in their place, right? You said.
Tried.
And beyond that, you couldn't do any more.
Oh, I couldn't go sit on them. I mean, they're not my kids. I couldn't tie them up.
If these had been white kids doing this.
I've done the same thing. I don't care what color their skin is.
Were you surprised when you saw the two different reactions between the two tables of kids?
No one called the cops on the white kids. People ran to the management with the black kids.
Dr. David Williams is a professor of sociology and public health at Harvard University, and he's studied racial attitudes for years. Dr. Williams, I know that you say everyone has something called unconscious bias. What is that exactly?
We are the sum total of all the experiences we have. We have all been shaped by what our culture has fed us. So that in American society, most Americans have unconscious, implicit biases, for example, of African Americans as lazy, as violent, as dangerous. The unconscious biases are beneath, and they shape what we do, and this is what's scary, without our conscious awareness. We have research that shows you take 2 African Americans and 2 whites, identical resumes, but have one white and one black, say he served a prison sentence for cocaine possession, send them in to apply for jobs. If you have a criminal record, whether you're black or white, you're less likely to get a call back for a job. But this is the stunning finding. It is easier for a white male with a criminal record to get a call back for a job than a black or Latino male whose record is clean. The resumes are identical.
Do African Americans have unconscious bias against whites?
I think if we look at the culture, you have to go back to what has the culture taught. The culture is not giving us negative stereotypes of whites. So what you more often find is African Americans have unconscious biases against African Americans at a lower percentage than whites do, but it's because remember, we are just reflecting what we have been taught, what we have been fed.
And I know that we're very mindful of that. Working in television, I think we can all speak to that, about the images that we're projecting, even in covering the news. We too infrequently show African Americans as we're showing them today. And we too frequently show them being arrested or being in terrible situations. So that's something we have to be cognizant of.
As when we do the immigration story in this country, too often we just see Mexican guys jumping over a fence, climbing under a fence. We never talk about immigration illegally from Ireland or Canada. It's all...
Well, up next, one of the most unexpected and moving reactions in the history of the show, What Would You Do? You'll see it when we come back.
Coming up, a shocking conversation.
That you adopting a black girl, a little black child, is going to be problems for your life. You couldn't have just waited for a white child?
Tracy, I'm not going to return her like she's a garment I don't want.
Well, why did you pick her out to begin with?
It's all coming up.
Welcome back. We're talking about race in America with Tavis Smiley, also Harvard sociologist Dr. David Williams, and John Quinones, host of the Hidden Camera series, What Would You Do? Okay, John, tell us what we're about to see in the next social experiment.
Okay, it's about adoption. You're at a restaurant and 2 white women, friends, are talking about the child that one of them has adopted. It turns out that child, though, is African American. Her friend doesn't like that. Check it out.
That you adopting a black girl, a little black child, is going to be problems for your life. You couldn't have just waited for a white child?
Tracy, I'm not going to return her like she's what, a garment I don't want.
Well, why did you pick her out to begin with?
This patron, a regular at the diner, has heard enough.
I wouldn't do it because I feel blackbirds stay with blackbirds and doves stay with doves.
Lorraine Coriel rises to the occasion.
My granddaughter came home to me and said she was pregnant. I went nuts. I want to be part of this child. I want her, and that child is the reason we breathe in the morning. I went through a similar situation in my life. I have a great-granddaughter whose father is African American. And that's what I was telling her. I told her that the baby has brought more joy in our life than we could ever have imagined. I didn't want her to have the child. I told her to have it adopted. I told her to, I don't even want to say the word, but
Abortion?
Mm-hmm. And I don't believe in it.
So the moral of this story?
Don't let the color of the skin interfere.
And And Lorraine Coriel is here. Hi, Lorraine.
Hi.
Nice to see you. You know, when you talk about your initial reaction to your granddaughter's pregnancy, do you feel like you were a different person back then?
Yes, yes. The years of Jada is now 5 years old, and I just could not imagine life without her. I mean, she's an absolute joy to us, and I wasted a lot of time and energy being upset.
You know, you say you went nuts when you found out. And where do you think that was coming from?
Well, I'm 71 years old. Back when I was growing up, intermarriage was not a thing that you did or you even thought about doing. So that's where I was coming from, thinking all the problems not only my granddaughter would have, but her daughter would have. But it's not that way anymore.
Do you think, Dr. Williams, there's still a lot of bias against interracial couples?
There's a generational shift. However, there is lingering, reluctance, especially on the parts of parents who often exert a lot of pressure on their children not to go down that road.
When people like Lorraine speak out, it makes it all worthwhile, and it's a testament to the words of Martin Luther King. You know, our lives begin to end the day we remain silent about things that matter.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Tavis is sticking around. Dr. Williams, thank you for coming in. Really interesting research that you're doing, and we appreciate it. And Lorraine, of course, thank you to you as well. Coming up, one of the hottest debates in the country, we're going to talk about stop and frisk. That's right after this.
Coming up.
And Los Angeles had a larger drop in those same crimes without using stop and frisk. So if it is true. I mean, 99.8% of stop and frisk stops do not result in finding a gun.
That's next.
And today we're talking about race in America. Attorney General Eric Holder, Hollywood mogul Tyler Perry, and Academy Award winner Forrest Whitaker all recently revealed they were victims of racial profiling, unfairly targeted because of the color of their skin. And last month, a district court ruling found the NYPD stop and frisk policy unconstitutional. Columbia University professor Mark Lamont Hill and CNN legal analyst Paul Callan are very familiar with both of these issues. Welcome to both of you. Thanks so much for being here. A lot of people assume racial profiling and stop and frisk are one and the same. Tell us the difference.
Well, racial profiling is a set of policies that says that we are going to, purely on the base of race, determine that we're going to make legal stops, that we are going to maybe make arrests, maybe do some level of investigation, purely on the basis of race. Stop and frisk is a slightly different policy that goes even beyond that. And in New York, we've seen it's been ruled unconstitutional, where we say we are going to stop and search people without necessarily reasonable suspicion, or the only reasonable suspicion is being black and outside. And that is a very different set of policies we've seen in New York that has been struck down.
And you, in fact, had an ordeal with the Philadelphia Police Department. What happened?
I was committing the crime of being young and black and outside, and I didn't have my PhD around my neck. So I was riding through Philadelphia and at midnight dropping a friend off, and the cars pulled up. They pulled me out of the car. They searched me, asked me where my guns were. They didn't ask me if I had guns. They asked me where the guns were. They searched me. They slammed me against the car. They told me that I was in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time in the wrong car. And I proceeded to sue the Philadelphia Police Department. Immediately, people jumped to the police officer's defense, saying that, you know, I must have done something wrong. This is prior to knowing who I was or what I did. Ultimately, I sued the police department. I won. The police officer is now off the force, not because of that incident, but because of a series of other incidents. But the point for me was that had I not had access to media, had I not had a job, a quote-unquote good job, I would have been one of many people who experience that every single day and don't have the luxury of fighting back.
Paul, I know that a judge recently ruled that New York City's stop and frisk policy was unconstitutional. You disagree strongly. I know you're a former homicide prosecutor. Why do you think this was such a bad decision?
Well, the reason I disagree is that when I started out as a young prosecutor, doing homicide cases, the homicide rate in those years, over 2,000 homicides a year in New York City. In the past couple of years, homicide rate, 400 or 500 homicides a year. This city has been transformed into a place where tourists feel safe, where everybody feels safe living here. And I think a lot of that has had to do with proactive policing, aggressive policing, and stop and frisk. And I'm terribly afraid that we're going to backpedal into the bad old days when this was the most dangerous city in America.
All your story notwithstanding, the data says to me that we are harassing, these are my words, I'm paraphrasing what the judge said, but we're unnecessarily harassing and haranguing black and brown men in this city. We're pulling them over, and they're finding nothing.
In stop and frisk, you don't expect everybody you stop to be arrested. The cops have to have reasonable suspicion. So if you have a bulge at the level of where I'm holding my hand here at waist level, police officer looks at that, he might say, he's got a gun. You're walking down the street furtively looking around with the bulge. That's behavior, suspicious behavior. You see a police officer and you start running immediately while you have those behaviors. All of those behaviors indicate grounds for a stop. Now, you may stop the person and come up with no gun, but that's still a perfectly legal stop. And how does that affect safety in New York? Well, it affects safety in New York because the bad guys now know that they better leave their guns at home because the cops might stop them and frisk them. And that's how it helps safety in New York by being more aggressive about this.
Can I push back just a little bit?
Sure thing.
One, I think that I agree with you. Proactive policing works, but we don't want to conflate proactive policing with stop and frisk. We could look at Los Angeles, 59% drop in crime. New Orleans, 49% drop in crime. Dallas, 46% drop in crime.
For what?
No, without. No, hold on. They all don't have stop.
That's why statistics are so dangerous.
Let me finish the point before you disagree with it, though.
I'm talking about 2,000 to 400, okay?
Right, and what I'm saying is that, and Los Angeles had a larger drop in those same crimes as did Dallas and New Orleans without using stop and frisk. So if we
it's just not true.
So if we, no, it is true. I mean, there's plenty of data out there.
Well, not from the 1970s until the current
No, I'm talking about over the last 15 years. And if you talk about stop and frisk, aggressive stop and frisk policies haven't been going on since the 1970s. So if you look at the actual window where the drops have happened precipitously in New York, they actually don't happen around stop and frisk. The other point is you say, well, the police are looking for things like bulging guns out of
behavior. They're looking for behavior.
99.8% of stop and frisk stops do not result in finding a gun. So either the police are really bad at finding guns, you get what I'm saying? So
you know what you're not calculating? Who left their gun at home? Who left the .44 caliber weapon at home?
Katie, we're missing the central point here that Paul hasn't addressed as far as I'm concerned. Why black and brown men? The other thing is that with all due respect to Paul doesn't feel this the way that Mark Lamont Hill or Tavis Smiley or Barack Obama or Forrest Whitaker or anybody else feels this, because of the color of your skin, don't get subjected to this.
Statistically, you may have a better feel for what the feelings are in the minority community than I do. But I have to say that there are a lot of people who live in minority neighborhoods who feel safer today because of more proactive, more aggressive policing.
Can't you have aggressive policing without stopping indiscriminately every African American boy?
It's a great question. You got to find a way to train the cops to be sensitive and at the same time not sacrifice the security that has made this one of the top cities and safest cities in America, filled with tourists and just a so much better place for everybody to live than it was in the past. And I don't want to see that go away. The security stuff, hey, it affects every time I go into court, you know what they make me do now? Take off my belt, my watch, my shoes. I got to go through a metal detector, okay? Everybody has to do that, okay? Because security, safety,
with all due respect, and I'm white too, obviously, but I don't think that we do experience. It's one thing to go to a courthouse.
I go to court.
No. What I'm saying, let me finish. We don't experience on a daily basis or just even on a weekly basis.
No, we don't.
Walking to a drugstore or being in a neighborhood and being stopped just because we're white. So it's very difficult, I think, for us to understand what it's really like.
I can't quarrel with that assessment at all. You're absolutely right.
Anyway, really important conversation. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, Paul, as well. We appreciate it. And when we come back, we're going to be talking with two mothers who lost their sons in two of the most racially charged cases of the last decade. That's right after this.
Coming up, a mother's heartbreak.
Trayvon was a child. He was a 17-year-old child.
Plus, the star of the hit movie Baggage Claim, Boris Kodjoe, opens up about race. That's coming.
It's amazing how something as simple and innocent as a hoodie can take on such powerful meaning in the wake of a tragedy. On July 16th, it became a rallying cry.
We, the jury, find George Zimmerman not guilty. Juror B37, is this your verdict? Yes.
It was the verdict that sent shockwaves across the nation. One by one, 6 female jurors found George Zimmerman not guilty in the murder of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. Protesters took to the streets.
And we want justice, and we want it now for Trayvon Martin.
Social media exploded.
One more. No justice, no peace.
And Trayvon's parents, Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, watched helplessly in grief and disbelief. 3 years before Trayvon Martin was killed, 22-year-old Oscar Grant suffered a similar fate. In the early morning hours, New Year's Day, 2009, Grant was making his way home on San Francisco's BART train when police responded to a disorderly conduct call. Multiple cell phone cameras captured BART police officers as they detained Grant and several other passengers on the train station platform. 2 officers, including Johannes Messerly, attempted to restrain Grant as he lay face down on the ground. Messerly then drew his gun and shot Grant once in the back. Oscar Grant was pronounced dead the next morning. Messerly was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and served 11 months in jail. Like Trayvon Martin, Oscar Grant was a young black man. Like Martin, Grant was unarmed. Both left behind a nation still divided, grieving families, and questions about who we are and where we go from here. Please welcome Oscar Grant's mother, Wanda Johnson, and her brother, Cephas, and Trayvon Martin's parents, Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, along with their attorney, Benjamin Crump. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you all coming. Thank you so, so much. And let me just start with Sabrina and Tracy. Both of you have, I think, conducted yourself with such grace and dignity. And I'm just wondering, given everything that you've been through, how are you holding up?
It's very difficult when you go through a tragedy that we've gone through. But I think through God's grace, through the support of people, through prayer, and, you know, just so many people just supporting us and lifting us up, that really helps.
I know that Wanda, your family, of course, faced a very similar situation as we saw. And I think you must have relived all of this with the release of the film Fruitvale Station, which really talks about what happened to Oscar. And in many ways, he and your family have become a symbol for racial injustice in this country. How do you feel about all that?
It's been very hurtful and hard for our family. And so if we could just get the message so that it doesn't happen to someone else, that's our goal. And, you know, was supported, you know, by so many community members. And we just, you know, thank God for those who prayed for us and, you know, the prayers that went forth, because that's what gave us our strength to endure.
Well, Sabrina, you spoke, I think, beautifully at the March on Washington festivities. What was the message that you wanted to get out that day?
I just wanted to, you know, just appeal to people's heart as it relates to children, because at the end of the day, Trayvon was a child. He was a 17-year-old child, and we have to make sure that we're wrapping our arms around our kids, and we're fighting for our kids.
Katie, I was fascinated, and I was fascinated. And I've been wanting to ask Wanda this question. The Fruitvale Station movie, how did you feel about the timing? You couldn't have planned that either. The timing of the release of this movie about what happened to Oscar around the same time as the Trayvon Martin case is coming to a...
We knew that we have to get the message out to young black and brown young men that your lives are valuable, you know, that you are worth something, that you are loved. No matter how you're depicted in society, you are loved. And so that was our goal as the movie came out.
How do you get beyond it, though, if you have to keep reliving this? I mean, it's a beautiful thing that your son is this symbol now of racial and civil injustice, but how, on a parental level, do you move beyond it?
I think, first and foremost, by just keeping our faith, keeping a strong conviction in God. And one thing that we understand as parents, since this whole tragic incident, is that it takes something good to fall for something greater to fall in place. So that is, you know, just understanding that his death has been, it's been like a snowball effect that is just gaining momentum, and it's helping heal the country in certain ways. That's something that motivates us to keep fighting for them.
Benjamin Crump, before we go, more than 30 states have some form of stand your ground laws, which allow self-defense with no requirement to retreat if there's fear of bodily harm. Those laws are really being carefully examined, aren't they?
For 200 years, we had self-defense, and it worked fine in America, but now they had this stand your ground evolve, and that's, in large way, what catapulted Trayvon Martin, because you could be the aggressor, you could follow a kid, shoot him in the heart, and go home and sleep in your bed at night. People were terribly troubled by that. And so the Trayvon Martin amendment to the Stand Your Ground law is common sense legislation. I also bring in Tracy Aston, is that you go vote at this midterm election in all these Stand Your Ground states that say you can't be the initial aggressor. You can't chase somebody. You can't go pick a fight and then shoot somebody and say, I was standing my ground. It flies in the face of all common sense. And it's a... And Katie, so hopefully something positive can come from something so negative. We pray that we have the Trayvon Martin Amendment to stand your ground so Tracy and Sabrina would know their son's death was not in vain.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end this conversation with you all than that. Thank you so much for being here today. Our deepest sympathies always with you. And if you'd like to learn more about the Stand Your Ground laws in your state, you can head to our website for more. That's katiecouric.com. We'll be right back. Katie Couric, along with Tavis Smiley, who has been joining me for this hour. The September issue of Ebony magazine featured 4 different covers as a tribute to Trayvon Martin. They included his family, director Spike Lee and his son Jackson, basketball star Dwayne Wade and his sons Zaire and Zion, and Boris Kodjoe and his son Nicholas. Please welcome Boris Kodjoe. Nice to see you, Boris. First of all, why was it so important to you, Boris, to be part of this project?
I'm a father. I have 2 children. I have a young son, Nicholas, who's 6 years old. And I was touched by that. And I was also, I realized that I had to call my father and my father-in-law to ask them about 15, 60 years ago and what they went through, just because I wanted to have a dialogue with my child. And I was lacking the vocabulary. I did not know how to address this issue with Nicholas, who was 6 years old. And I was frustrated about that. And also, I wanted to make sure that people are reminded that over 3,000 young black men are killed at the hand of a gun every single year. And that we have come to accept that as a norm. And I didn't want to accept that any further. I was guilty of that as well. So when Amy called me and asked me to be a part of that, I couldn't wait.
You are the product of a biracial relationship. We were talking earlier in this show about interracial couples, and they are now more prevalent than ever. How did that inform your views or develop your views on race in America?
It's very interesting because what Professor Williams said earlier was also very interesting to me, because I grew up in Germany. My mother's white, my father's from Africa. the whole thing about walking in others' shoes is a very important factor in this discussion because, like, Katie, you can't possibly know what I feel like in those circumstances. And I think it's not fair to pretend to understand. I cannot go to a rape victim and say, I understand. It's impossible. What I can do is be sympathetic to your plight. I can try to support you. I can be accepting and respecting of you or of your situation, and then we can go from there. And I thought that was a very good point.
That's very well said. Amy Du Bois Barnett is the editor-in-chief of Ebony Magazine. And Amy, I understand when these issues came out, you know, the various covers, it ignited a huge debate on Twitter.
It did.
What kind of things were people saying?
My core readers and most African Americans understood what we were doing with the covers and were very appreciative and grateful that we were continuing this conversation about race. Then there was a whole other factor of people who took that opportunity to basically display shocking levels of frankly, of racism and to hurl racial epithets, you know, at the subjects of the covers and at African Americans in general. And so it just ignited a huge firestorm across social media, which was a little bit unexpected, to be honest.
What was your goal?
I wanted to create images that would represent the fact that we are looking at African American boys and we are assuming guilt, and that we as African Americans and that people in this country will no longer take that anymore.
It's almost like we've become completely nonchalant about violence because we see it everywhere. Our kids see it everywhere. I think we as parents, teachers, churches, community leaders have to be proactive in establishing new paradigms around violence and making sure that kids understand that this is not okay, this is not acceptable, because when it comes to making a choice in those situations, hopefully, if we are proactive as those leaders and teachers and parents, our child will make a different choice. And that's the way to be proactive and not just talk about it.
It's a huge problem and many layers, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't be chipping away at those layers little by little. Boris, thank you so much. Amy, thank you as well, and we'll be back right after this.
Can I go back and do that again?
Want tickets to Katie? Visit www.katiecouric.com to request a spot in our live audience.
I hope you all have appreciated this conversation about race in America, and the discussion will continue online. We've got so much more on katiecouric.com, including how to talk to your kids about this important topic. Meanwhile, Tavis Smiley, thank you so much for spending the day with us. Really, thank you. Thank you. Thank you at home so much for watching. Thank you all for being here and being a part of this important discussion. And we'll see you next time.
Get away.